But today's message is titled, Your Miracle Requires Motion. Your miracle requires motion. You know, I'm going somewhere with this, but how many of you guys realize how crazy it is raising little kids, and one of the scariest parts of it is taking them into a public restroom? I remember my son, you know, it was like I would take him in there, and my heart was, okay, I got to get him in here. He's got to go potty. We got to do our thing. But man, he was so intent on touching everything. Anybody have that kid? You know, it's like, oh, Dad, look at the water. It's like, no, that's not water. You know, it's like, what are you doing? No, don't touch that. You know, they can't just sit on the toilet. You know, they got to be rubbing their hands. And I'm just like, oh, this is so gross. Like, what is going on here? You know, and I thank God for technology and this thing called the motion sensor, because public restrooms have actually changed over the last few years. Due to a motion sensor, you can walk in and you move your hand underneath it. Woo, the water starts to flow. You can put your hand underneath the towel dispenser, and all of a sudden, or a dryer, right? You walk into a room, motion sensor, the lights come on. And so you don't really have to touch much. But what I do want to talk to you about today is that your miracle requires motion. Just like you putting your hand underneath the towel dispenser, under the soap dispenser, or the water faucet, once there's a little bit of motion, it activates the very thing that you need. And I want you to get this today, is that most miracles are activated by movement. And I'm going to talk about specific movement. But most miracles, most breakthroughs are activated by movement. Let me ask you a question today. How many of you guys are believing for something? Yeah, every hand should be up in this place, because if not, man, you're dying. Come on, you're stuck. Here's the thing, is that many of you are believing to buy your first home. Some of you are believing to have your first child. Some of you are believing for a marriage, a wedding partner, or I guess a marriage or wedding partner. You're believing for a spouse. Come on, man. You're believing for something. You're believing for a healing in your body. You're believing for a financial breakthrough. You're believing for something, to finish school, to get promoted in your job. You should be believing for something. And what I want you to understand today is that most miracles, most breakthroughs, what is a breakthrough? It's a sudden and dramatic advance. It means that you were stuck at one point, and there was a moment that you were able to have an advance, a sudden and dramatic advance. I believe that your sudden and dramatic advance is very much connected to your movement. And what I want you to understand today is that it's not just about moving to something, it's about moving to someone. Because some of you are going, well, if I can just get this new job, if I can just get that certification, if I can just get this thing, this relationship, if I just had a little bit more money or another opportunity, yeah, that would solve all of it. But I want you to know that in many ways, it's still going to leave you empty. Because as we understand from Scripture, that the miracles only happen by one person, and it's by our movement toward that one person. So I want to take you to this story today in Mark chapter 5, verse 24 through 29. Very familiar story to many of you. And it says, so Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. Can you imagine this? Jesus walking, and there's all these people. They're pressing in. Why? Because they've heard that this guy, when he touches the lame, they get up. They've heard that when he touches blind eyes, the blind eyes open. That when he touches deaf ears, that people can hear. They've heard that when he touches the dead, that they rise. So you can just sense as he's walking, everybody's trying to get close to him. And it says this, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Have you ever experienced that in your life? That you've listened to the experts, you've listened to the counselors, you've listened to these people and those people, you've done everything you've known to do, and it just seems like your situation is actually getting worse. That wall that you've hit seems like somebody's like stacking it up and actually reinforcing it. Well, it says when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. I want you to notice something today, that she didn't stand still, that in fact she did press in, that she pressed forward, that there was a movement. She realized that if I have this need, and if I'm going to get what I need, if I'm going to get what I want, there has to be movement on my part, that I have to move toward the one that has the resources, has the ability to do what I need done. And so she didn't leave it up to chance. I would venture to say that there are many of you that have prayed and prayed and prayed for your situation and nothing has happened. And instead of pressing, instead of moving, instead of getting into motion, you are now sitting. I've seen this, that when people get discouraged, when they're down, you see in the movies, right, where they do, you see this young kid, he's so discouraged, he's sitting on a curb. He's just like, oh, man, and you can sense that that is a position of defeat. And some of you, you might find yourself in that place today, that rather than pressing in, rather than moving forward, you have now sat down in discouragement. And I want to call you forward today. I want her to be an example for us that she was not going to leave anything to chance. She was going to press in. Why? Because the pressing through is the very thing that connects you to the blessing that God has for you. And so here's a thought for you. If you're taking notes, write it down. If you're not, write it down. Here's the thought, is that there is power in proximity. There's power in proximity. See, I have this extension cord right here, and this end right here gives us access to great power, 120 volts, right? And this can make things move. This can make things light up. This can make things come alive. But if I'm just right here, this has so much potential to carry power, but its proximity will be the determiner if power will flow or if it won't. See, right now, it's not close to anything that has power. But right up here, I have a power source that I can plug into. So as it gets closer and closer to the source, that's what activates its ability to actually have power. Are you guys catching this today? And so with Christ in the same way is that if you stay away from him, if you're frustrated with God, if you're angry with God, he didn't come through. This happened to me. Why this happened in my life? I prayed. I didn't get any response. And you just stay like, I'm just stuck. And Jesus is walking by and you're like, you know what? If he really wants to heal me, he's going to heal me. He knows my needs. Why do I need to tell him anything? Why do I need to pray? I don't need to pray. He knows what I need. And if he wants to do it, he'll do it. But that woman is a great example for you and I, that it was through her proximity, it was through her getting close to the power source that her miracle was unleashed. And I want you to know today, the same thing is for you and I. That when we move closer to God, the potential for a miracle, the potential for a breakthrough is so much greater. I hope that this is making sense to somebody here today. So I have I have 4 things, in fact, that I want to share with you. But backing up real quick, I want to just show you one verse. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, it really lays this out. It says, let us approach. Would you guys say approach with me? Approach. Let us approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may what? Receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Do you guys notice there that there's approach and there's receive? There's an approaching and there's a receiving. There's the proximity factor that releases the power. So let me just encourage you. If you get anything today, get this. God's drawing you and he's calling you to himself. And that for many of us, we're going to have to get to a point where we're willing to press through some things. And that's what I want to share with you today is 4 things that you must press through. You cannot sit on your hands. You can't sit on the curb. You can't give up. That your miracle requires movement. Your miracle requires motion. So number 1 is this, is that you're going to have to press past the pain. You're going to have to press past the pain. I know that so many of you in this room, you've struggled with things. You've had to, you've been maybe in your life, you feel like you've been dealt a difficult hand. This has been one of the toughest seasons that you've had to walk through. Or maybe this has been one of the greatest seasons, but yet you don't realize that you're heading into one. And you're going to have to learn, and I have to learn, that when I'm struggling, that I have to be willing to press through the pain of my situation. In Mark 5:25, it says this, picking our story back up. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. This woman understood what it was to experience pain. No relief in her attempts for healing, only more pain. And here's something that you've got to get today, church, is that pain can paralyze you or it can propel you forward. It can paralyze you or it can propel you forward. It can make you feel as though you're stuck or imprisoned when you're in this place of pain. Why? Because pain, when it hits, it hurts. And God knows this. And this is why he's constantly calling you to himself. This is why he's drawing us to himself. This is why that veil was torn. This is why he's made himself available to us, because he's calling you to something. And he's saying, I want you to fight through. I don't want you to give up. You have to. You must fight through. You can't be paralyzed. You can't be in this state of feeling imprisoned and stuck. And I know that for some of you, that is your reality today, is that you feel like you are absolutely stuck. You feel like you're imprisoned in a marriage that is just not going right. You feel that you're imprisoned in the disease that is riddling your body right now. You feel imprisoned in this place of constantly being broke. At the end of the month, you're like, man, I don't know how much more stress I can handle because we can't make our bills. You're imprisoned with certain things. Sometimes it's your own poor self-image of yourself. You're imprisoned, and God is saying, I want to free you. But this is the crossroads that you're in, is that you can either be imprisoned, paralyzed, or you can use that pain to propel you. And I look at this woman after suffering for 12 years. There was nothing that was going to hold her back from getting her healing. There was nothing that was going to hold her back. She was going to press through the pain of rejection, press through the pain of the opinions that others held of her, and say, Jesus is there. He is the healer. He is that source. He's that power source. And I'm going to do everything possible to press through to get a hold of what I need in this moment. It was on June 23rd, 2019, that pain entered into my life unexpectedly. Veronica and I were being blessed out in a beautiful service with the church that we were pastoring at. We were being sent out to actually plant Hub City Church. And on June 23rd, my life changed. I remember that morning I got up and I was feeling a little bit odd, a little bit awkward. I was having a hard time regulating my temperature. I was hot, I was cold, I was hot, I was cold. And honestly, Veronica's like, babe, maybe we shouldn't go this morning. I said, no way. They're blessing us out. And I was really excited about the prospects of what life was going to be. And, as us launching our own church. But little did I know that day would take a dramatic turn. And within hours, I found myself going into unconsciousness and tremendous pain. And that would be a day where I found my first ambulance ride. Anybody ever have an ambulance ride? That's interesting. And that would be a day where I'd find myself fighting for my life. I remember that would be a day where I was experiencing what it was like to get an NG tube pushed up your nose down into your stomach and them messing that up 3 times. Man, that was pretty painful. I would understand what it was to sleep in a hospital for 11 days with crazy people yelling and screaming all night. I would know what it was to not eat for 4 days or drink anything for 4 days. I would know what it was that when I did get to eat, they'd give me this little cup of medicine that was kind of tasted like grape nuts. Anybody have grape nuts? Man, those things are terrible. I'm sorry. And all I got was grape nuts and a little bit of apple juice. That's all I had every day because they were pumping my stomach. And I was trying to recover. They were trying to figure out how to help me recover past an intestinal blockage that literally was killing me. My kidneys were failing. My liver was failing. I was in a very, very, tough spot. And I remember after being in excruciating pain and just wanting to go home, I remember crying out to God, and I realized that as he spoke something to me, and this is something that I want to say to you here today, is that for many of you, you got to get this in your heart. The only way out is to go through. The only way out is to go through. I remember just thinking man, how can I escape this? Because I literally felt like I was in a prison. I was going nuts in there. And I remember just feeling like I've got to get out of here, but realized that the only way out was to go through what I was going through at the time. And I don't know who gave me this book. It was a devotional, and I still don't know where it's from. It showed up that day, and I was like, you know what? I need to press into the Lord this morning. I'll never forget this. It was July 3rd. I need to press in. I wanted to go home. 11 days had gone by. I was tired of getting poked with needles. The morphine was giving me these super dark dreams and thoughts, and I was so done. Have you ever been just at a really low moment in life and you just want to escape it? That's where I was. And so in that time, I remember just reaching to this devotional, and I opened it up to July 3rd. It was that day. And I want to read something to you, and I'm in a moment of transparency. I want to show you, man, I was in a bad place. I had multiple IVs. Stuff was leaking. I was done. But then I see this devotional, and I want to read it to you today because I believe this is going to speak to some of you in this room today. And it said simply this: time for a jailbreak. Some of you need a jailbreak today, man. You are in a prison of anxiety. You're in a prison of depression. You're in a prison of financial ruin. You feel like you're in this prison. And I want to give you hope and inspire you today through the word of God that it is time for a jailbreak. In Acts 16:26, it says, and suddenly there was a great earthquake so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's bonds or bands were loosed. Do you realize this was Paul and Silas in a desperate situation, anchored to the ground in a Roman prison. And here they are. They're in this place of what seems desperate, but yet they're praising God. What are they doing? They're pressing past their pain into his presence, realizing that if they connect to him, that he has everything that they need. What did they need? They needed to be freed. And some of you today, you need to be freed from what it is that you're facing. And so understand that right here, this is what I read. I'm going to tell you, this fired me up. And this is the very thing that allowed me to press through that morning. And I believe that for some of you, you need to hear this today. It says, get your gear ready. Find all of your belongings. Find every precious thing to you and pack it because it's time for a jailbreak. You are being completely freed from all imprisoning thoughts, passions, and desires. Even your dreams will go free. Your life is about to soar into its greatness. The foundation of the prison house will crumble today. The bars will melt, the jailer will disappear, and the liberator's trumpet will sound for you. Notice that your freedom becomes your ministry. Where you are freed, you free. Where you are healed, you heal. And where you are restored, you restore. I never waste a life. I never lose anything precious. I keep and preserve. I improve and replenish. I heal and mend. So will you. Close your eyes and forget the jail of life. Forget the jailer's clanging keys. Let your mind be erased and reprogrammed with life. The captive has become the liberator. That's you, and that's it. Come on, man, that fired me up that day. That fired me up. I was like, you know what? I am called with a purpose. That I have been called as God freed me. That I've been called to free others. That he healed me. He's called me to help heal other people. As I was broken, God mended me. So then therefore is a call to help mend others. And it was in that moment I was able to press through the pain and say, you know what? Whatever your will is, I'm willing to go through it. And here's what happened. This is really cool. Is that same day, even though it was 10:37 at night, they released us to go home. And that's where my healing process actually began. God is the God of breakthrough. God is the God of breakthrough. And if he can do it for us, he can do it for you, my friend. But you must be willing to press through the pain. The second thing is that you're going to have to press through disappointment. Listen, this life is going to be tough at times, and you're going to get bad news. You're going to find yourself in difficult situations. But God is sufficient. His grace is sufficient for you. See, as we see in this story, going back in Mark chapter 5, verse 26, it says, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Talk about a disappointment. Have you given it all to your marriage, but yet it's still on the rocks? Have you given your all in school, but yet you still feel as though you're failing? Have you given it all to your business, that you've worked tirelessly? Maybe it's in your career, and you're like, I've given everything that I have that I know to do, but yet I still find myself stuck. Let me just say, friend, don't give up. I know that some of you young moms, you're tired. You're raising these kids and you're going, man, is it even making a difference? I thought that the other day when I had that conversation, little Johnny was going to get better and he's going to be nicer to his brother and nicer to his sister, but now he seems like he's more mean. And you're discouraged. You can't change one more diaper. It's like you're at the end of your rope. Listen, many of us have all been there, but you got to press through the disappointment. You've got to press through. It's not the end. It's just part of the journey. Why? Because for many of you, remember this. You can't stop. And your way out is actually through. Here's the third thing. You have to press past religion. Press past religion. See, what the law did is the law deemed her unclean. She had been bleeding. So let me just, for those of you that don't understand what's actually going on here. Is so according to the law in those days, if a woman was on her period or she had had a baby, right? We understand that women bleed after having a baby until they heal. In that time, a woman was considered unclean. So when you were considered unclean, whether you're on your period or had a baby, you couldn't go into the synagogue. So meaning you couldn't go to church. Not only that, you weren't supposed to be out in general public. Why? Because it was just considered unclean. Okay, that was the religious law. Okay, so here's this woman who has had this issue for 12 years. Do you realize she couldn't go to church for 12 years? Do you realize that she couldn't be around people for 12 years? Guys, this is not only disappointing, but the religious part, the law was actually, instead of propelling her toward Jesus, it was keeping her away. And the same thing happens with religion. Instead of a relationship with God, is that religion will push you away. It'll keep you away from Jesus instead of drawing him or drawing you to him. It keeps you bound to shame and guilt. I've noticed this, that in church, after being a pastor for the last 11 years, I've noticed that when people are doing really good, they're at church. When people are doing really good and their marriage is okay and things are going good, man, they're around, they're serving. But I've noticed this to be a trend, not with everybody, but it is a common trend, is that when they're not doing good, I know they're not doing good. Why? Because they're hiding out. They stop showing up to church. They bail out on teams. They stop giving. They stop serving. It's a tall tale sign that they're struggling, that they're in a bad place. And usually that is rooted in religion. That's usually rooted in religion. Why? Because you've been taught that if you've had a bad week, if a couple cuss words flew out of your mouth, you are such a hypocrite. What are you doing in church? You're dirty. You're shameful. What? Why would you be in the house of God when you knew that you were sleeping with your boyfriend last night, that you were messing with your girlfriend last night, when you were smoking that stuff or drinking that stuff? Like, why would you come into this atmosphere, this godly atmosphere, and bring all that dirtiness in here? That's religion speaking. But what we know is that God, he doesn't say, get cleaned up and then come to me. He says, come to me and let me clean you up. Let's deal with those issues, because it's not just about the behavior. God wants to heal the reason that you're doing those things. If you're using these worldly things to cope and try to feel normal or to try to medicate from the pain that you're feeling, God is saying, let me heal the pain that is causing you to do that first, instead of just trying to live with behavior modification, or sin management is what I like to call it. But see, religion will always push you away from God instead of draw you to him. And for some of you, you have to press past that. You've been taught some things when you were young, that when you make a mistake, that it's not okay to make a mistake, that perfection was required of you, and that you should feel low, you should feel so bad. But I know this to be true, that if I sin, that I confess my sin to Jesus, and that he's faithful and just to forgive me and to cleanse me of all unrighteousness. He purifies me. I can't do it for myself, but he can. And some of you need to get this. In John 6:37, it says this, and those the Father gives me. This is Jesus speaking, saying, those who come to me because the Father has drawn them to me, he says, will come to me, and whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. Some of you need to press through religion because you've been conditioned. Now, hear me clearly. Some of you are going, well, so does that mean that we just do whatever we want? Absolutely not. But see, there's something that's different, because when you're in a relationship with somebody that you truly love, you don't do what you do for them out of obligation. You do for them what you do out of love. And you also don't do other things. I've been married to the same woman for 28 years and have been faithful to her. And the reason isn't because, oh, well, they said it's wrong to cheat on her. No, I love her and I don't want to break her heart. And she does the same thing for me. It's out of love that we do what we do for one another. It's not just because somebody told us that we shouldn't. And it's the same thing with God, is that when you develop a relationship with him, it's out of your love and devotion to him that you don't do the things that you used to do. Is this making sense to you today? So you got to press past understanding that whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. So some of you today, that is where you're at in life, is that God is saying to you that your miracle requires movement. And what is it? It's past your limited or faulty understanding of who he is, and allowing him to embrace you as you move toward him. Here's the fourth thing. If I can get you up, Pastor Joe, that'd be great. Is that you're going to have to press past people. You're going to have to press past people. In Mark 5:27, going back to our story, it says, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. There was no way that she was going to leave that day without pressing to get her miracle. There was no way. But she was going to have to go through some people in order to touch him. And some of you, that's the same spot that you find yourself in today, is that you're going to have to press through people's opinions. You're going to have to press through your own insecurities. Because it's not just about the people around you, it's about you too. It's about me. That sometimes we don't realize that we want to put the blame on others, but it's actually us. It's actually us. We're in the way as well, and we got to press past our own opinions, our own ideas. We got to be willing to submit everything, every single part of our life to him and say, God, is this your will? Is this your way? I want to do your will, your way, not mine. But for some of you, it's the people in your lives that you're going to have to press past. Some of you have doubters. They're like, why are you still praying for that? Why are you still praying for that child to come home? Why are you still praying for your husband to get it right? Why are you still praying for your wife to come back? Why are you still believing? And they're speaking against, they just speak doubt. It's like, you've been praying so long. This woman had been believing for 12 years. Most of us would have said, well, I just don't think it's God's will for your life. I think that this is what God wants for you. He's going to use your brokenness as a testimony. And sometimes because things don't happen in the way that we think they should, then we just we don't realize that we're causing more doubt instead of speaking faith into a situation. And for some of you, your movement is going to be to take a step towards God and move away from the doubters in your life. Some of you have haters in your life. You have people that don't want you to get your breakthrough. You know, one of the most heartbreaking things for Veronica and I is we've been in a really, really beautiful season over the last 6 years, but it's been the hardest 6 years of our life in so many ways. And one of the things that hurt me the most is that when we left to plant this church, that there were people that said they were praying for us, and we came to find out they were praying against us. That was heartbreaking. There were people that were, with their mouths, were so for us, but behind our backs were against us, and that hurt. It hurt. And we felt the betrayal. We felt the pain. And there's going to be some people in your life that they don't want you to succeed. You know what you do? You got to move away from them. You got to move toward Jesus, and your first movement, your motion is going to him, because he's going to speak the words of life that you need to hear, not these words of death and discouragement. For some of you, as I said, you have to move past yourself. You're in a place of being so weary of waiting on a miracle. She waited, as we said, for 12 years, but she kept pressing. And when there was an opportunity, she seized her moment. And let that be an example to you and I today. We've got to seize our moment. You're in a season, you know, as I say this often, I believe that today's a divine moment. It's a divine encounter. You've come here, and some of you are going, oh, I just came to church because that's what we do every Sunday. It's kind of like it's our flow. But perhaps today is your day of breakthrough. Perhaps today is the day where Jesus walks by right in front of you. And what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there? Or are you going to reach out? Are you going to go after him at all costs and say, it doesn't matter. I'll make a fool out of myself. I've got to do whatever I've got to do because I realize that he's got what I need. The proximity factor. I got to get close to him because he's the one that possesses the power and the authority and the ability to do what I need. I can't do it. I've done everything I know to do, and I've still come up short, but I realize like right now is my moment. And for some of you, today is that moment. Some of you have been contemplating quitting. You know, one of the things that I'm ashamed of most is that in that season, when I left the hospital, I thought that I was going to get well really quick. I thought, man, we're going to plant this church, and it's going to be great. But little did I know it would be 4 months of excruciating pain and torment. And I remember waking up one day, and I never thought that I'd get to the point of being so low that I walked in a room and I told Veronica, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And she looked at me, and I can see in that moment that those words, when they came out of my mouth, it did something to her. I could see that there was a pain and there was a fear that I unleashed in that moment. And I regret ever saying those words. But I was so done. I was so tired of being so broken. I was so tired of being so sick. I was tired of being up at night. I was tired of just my faith was tested. My body was tested. My mind was tested. My emotions, every part of me was tested in that season. And I look back on that day and I go, man, like I uttered those words, like I can't do this anymore. And I'll tell you what, the only thing that propelled me forward is my daughter had showed up that day with my grandson. And I thank God for that day because, man, that little kid, he came in and he was just a ball of joy. It refocused me and reminded me that I've got a purpose. That if there's anybody to fight for, I'm going to fight for that little kid. I'm going to fight for my generations. And some of you today, you have contemplated quitting, and it is time to find a reason to live. It's time to find a reason to keep going and to not quit. Because the only people that lose at the end are the ones that quit. It's not the people that get knocked down and get knocked down and get knocked down and get knocked down and fail and mess up and fail and mess up and get up and keep going. And those people are not the ones who fail. It's only those who quit and give up. You walk out on your faith. You walk out on your spouse. You walk out on your kids. You walk out on your dream. You walk out on your calling. Those are the ones that fail. But if you'll just keep getting up, if you'll just keep saying, you know what, no matter what happens, I am going to press through the pain. I'm going to press through the disappointment. I'm going to press through the religion. I'm going to press through the people. I'm going to press through myself. I'm going to press through everything in order to get what I need. I love how Paul, as I close today, he says this in Galatians 6:9. He says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if what? If we do not give up. For those of you that feel like giving up today, don't give up. Keep pressing. Your way out is through. Your way out is through.